anybody goes out into the wide world, you've got the same statistics and the same kind of talking points to start from. And if it's consistent, then your marketing is consistent, your branding is consistent from a very, very early stage.
Welcome to this week's Entrepreneurship 101 lecture. My name is Carrie Damon. I'm the Director of Entrepreneurship Programs here at Mars. Right off the top, I'd like to give a shout out to NORCAT in Sudbury and Innovation Factory in Hamilton, who are watching via webcast satellite centers. And I just wanted to also start tonight's lecture with a thank you to a team member. For some of you, I see some familiar faces that have been coming to Entrepreneurship 101 on and off over the last 3 years. We have a team member who has been working diligently for the 30 weeks of the program for the last 3 years, and she's actually going on maternity leave. This will be her last Entrepreneurship 101 until December. She's in the corner there, being quiet as usual. Everybody, please thank Marielle. I'm going to miss her terribly. You can see how well run this program is, and it's always due to Marielle's hard work and diligence. So thank you very much, Marielle. We appreciate it. So with that, I have one announcement. We do have a global leadership upcoming for those in the life sciences and healthcare space. It's called Surfing the Big Waves in Health Innovation, Big Data and Personalized Medicine. It's November 13th, and we've got a panel of 3 speakers coming from abroad for this. So if you're in the healthcare IT or data or personalized medicine space, I recommend you go on the Mars website and register for that event. It'll be a good one. This one, because of the nature of the knowledge that they're sharing, will not be digitally recorded, so if you're interested, you'll have to attend live rather than watch the video. And with that, I will introduce our speaker, Joe Wilson. So this lecture tonight on value proposition links into a lot of what we talked about last week with the business model canvas. You might remember Nathan talking about the business model canvas and how the centerpiece was the value proposition. So value proposition is one of the most important things that you will build as an entrepreneur, not only to communicate your idea, but to really find that product market fit that he was, the product problem solution fit and then product market fit later. Joe gets rave reviews every year. He's a great, not only a great speaker, but a great advisor here at Mars. He works as a senior strategist in our education cluster, which is working with almost 200 companies that are trying to sell into the K-12 and university space. He gives advice on customer development, structuring pilots, securing funding, and researching learning outcomes in order to allow high potential startups to scale. He's worked with my team actually quite actively. Used to work with us consistently on the Entrepreneurs Toolkit Workshops program, which some of you might have attended the workshops. Joe was instrumental in building those in the early days. He is also a writer. He writes on topics of science, innovation, and education for Now Magazine, The Globe and Mail, Financial Post, and Young Street. And we got some interesting news that Joe's going to show you guys a video tonight that he made with, I forget the name of the... Extra Normal. It was this cool website that used to be able to make these animation videos. Anyways, the website no longer exists, but his video still does, and it's one of the best ways that we can explain how not to do a value proposition. You might remember we mentioned Steve Blank last week as one of the leading thinkers in entrepreneurial management. Well, Steve Blank somehow found his video and shared it. So we were pretty impressed that he found us, which is great. So with that, I would like to welcome Joe to the stage.
Good evening, everybody. It's good to be here. This is the 4th time that I'm going to be doing this lecture, and so I wanted to do something a little different. So this is, if you've seen any of this stuff online, this is going to be different. You can see the past lectures, right? So there's no reason to come again and see the same thing. And 3 years ago was before I had kids. And the 3 years of those same lectures, they're the same thing, except I just get more and more haggard as time goes by. So this is a haggard version of a new talk. We do a lot of research. When we were putting together those workshops, we did a lot of research and asked a lot of investors, a lot of entrepreneurs, what they liked about those workshops, what they liked about these programs such as E101. And one of the, especially from the investors, one of the things that came back was the lack of attention paid to this piece, the value proposition. In many ways, you can think of the value prop as the core thesis, as the core building block of the rest of your business. The business model canvas, as Carrie mentioned, right in the heart of it, right in the center square, the keystone, is your value proposition. All the other things come from that. And today my angle on this is that the value proposition is not only the keystone of your business model, but the value proposition is the keystone for your marketing as well. So let me explain how that works. I'm going to speak about the value proposition and what it is, but then I'm going to quickly speak about what it's not. You know, you've probably heard all these terms and not sure where to use them or when to use them. I'm going to try to explain them through a marketing lens so you can get a sense of when you use what and what they're good for. Some of them are good for a lot. Some of them aren't that good for much. So I'll even prioritize them for you. There is a workbook in the toolkit just called Crafting Your Value Proposition, and I would encourage you all to download it and work through the exercises. It's designed to be practical, so they're not academic exercises. They're things you can do and immediately apply to your company. My old lectures focused on this book in a very linear fashion, but I'm going to go off book a little bit here and talk a bit about marketing and then tie it back in at the end. So one of the ways to start talking about a value proposition and best practices in communication is to start from the flip side, which is how not to do it. Mars has been advising entrepreneurs for 8 years now, and we've seen thousands of entrepreneurs come through these walls. At the beginning especially, many of them were in the life science and medical science fields. So they were often very, very highly trained in medical science and research. But the business side of things was foreign to them. So our job was to kind of retrain them in a new setting. And so this is based on a guy that we worked with in our very first workshop series. And he sounded something like this.
Hey, I've got a great idea for a business.
That's exciting. Tell me about it.
I've developed a chemical isomer that links to volatile organic compounds causing carbon bonds to rupture and wraps them in a nanotube coating.
Huh. That's a little confusing. Can you dumb it down for me?
Sure. What I do is I take a proprietary isomer that I developed with a picric acid wash that hollows out the carbon bonds and replaces them with a nanotube wrapping.
Okay, so I guess it's pretty technical.
Oh yeah. I've been working on this isomer for 9 years.
So what's the business idea?
To sell it.
To who?
Everybody will want one.
What for?
So they can wrap their volatile organic compounds in carbon nanotubes.
I think you might need a target customer. I don't think I need to wrap my compounds in your nanotube.
Well, maybe not you.
So, for people who buy it, what's the value you are providing them?
I've developed a chemical isomer that links to volatile organic compounds causing carbon bonds to rupture and wraps them in a nanotube coating.
You've said that already. This is getting annoying. Why should anyone care about your isomer?
I spent 9 years on this.
I know that. Okay, pretend I'm an investor. How can I make money off your product?
By selling it.
You're a smart guy, but try not to think like a scientist. Think like a business person.
Okay. Value chain. Term sheet.
I have to go now and answer that.
That's not your phone.
I know.
So, like Carrie said, this was something that was going around 4 years ago, and it looks remarkably dated now because this site doesn't even exist anymore. But the idea is that there's a barrier to communication between those two people. And our job as coaches, and your job as an entrepreneur, is essentially to act as a translator. From the language that you're comfortable in your domain specific, into the language of business, and really into, and that doesn't mean you're using business jargon, but into plain language that anybody can understand. It's not easy to do. You know, the scientist, the gentleman that this is based on, he understood from working for this for over years and years, he understood at a deep level, deeper than any of us understood, what the value of that was and why it was important for society to have this. But he couldn't convey that because he was stuck in his own language with his own world. It turns out that this isomer is amazing. It took us 3 days of workshop. This isomer, imagine a paint assembly line where there's paint going into cans. All you do is add a few drops of this isomer, and it makes the paint less dangerous, like more environmentally friendly. All the nasty smells and stuff gets rid of them. We were like, that's amazing. You know, why didn't you just say that? And he'd say, I did say that. I said, I've been working on a chemical isomer that does X, Y, Z. He couldn't see that they were two different. He was saying two different things. So when you're using language in any of the stuff I'm going to be talking about, but especially your value proposition, it's important to take out any technical words or any jargon words that you notice. And sometimes you don't notice them because they're just language to you. You got to share it with somebody else and say, does this make sense? You got to tell it to 50 people at a dinner party, and if they all go, yeah, I get that, that sounds cool, then you've got a good value proposition. The one corollary to this is that if you are ever speaking to an investor who, say only invests in life science companies, or used to be a PhD student in biology and then got sucked into the world of finance, if you know that they will get the words, then you can kind of nerd it up with them. But in general, you want nice plain English. So these kinds of words are a no-no. The other thing, and we'll get back to this in a couple of other examples, is when you are talking about your product and about the value you bring, you don't want to use words like this. It's a rule of thumb for good writing, and I would say in good communicating in general, is that you show people what you want them to know. You don't tell them what it is. If you tell them it's amazing, they're going to be like, yeah, well, everybody thinks their thing is amazing. But if you show them the amazing features and you explain to them why it's amazing, then you've provided evidence for that claim. So it's best to avoid these empty words because they don't have any real meaning behind them. They're just claims that you don't have the right to make yet. So don't use those words either. So let's get into the granular aspects of what a value proposition is and when it's used. Value proposition is one sentence. It's the sentence that explains what you've got and what unique benefits or unique value you can deliver a certain set of people, a target customer. That sentence, I like to think of it as equivalent to the thesis in the essay you used to write in grade 11. Your teacher would say, make the thesis bold, right, so it stands out. That thesis is the main crux of your entire essay. All the other points and paragraphs need to go back and prove that thesis. The value proposition is the thesis, or the hypothesis, if you want to think about it scientifically, of your business. That's the thing that every day you go out and you set to prove or disprove. And then once you've got a hypothesis that is true, yes, I am delivering value to these people in this way, and they're willing to pay for it, then you've got something around which you can build a business model and grow a company. So this hypothesis needs to be tested. And a big theme of what you're going to be hearing over the next few weeks is this idea of testing with real customers out of the building, A/B tests, randomized tests, customer interviews. These are all ways of testing your assumptions, the assumptions around your value proposition and the entire business model. All that to say is that your value proposition will change. You think you've got it nailed, you're really happy with all the words and where the commas are, you've got this perfectly crafted sentence, and then you'll go and interview 10 people, and they won't like it at all. you'll find that the values you are claiming are things that don't resonate with them. A value proposition is not equivalent to these other things: a tagline, a mission statement, an elevator pitch, positioning statement, and a positioning metaphor. Now, I'm going to be talking about these things in a minute and how they are spin-offs of that value proposition, but they're not synonyms. The value proposition is the core of all of them. Once you've got that one down, that central value proposition, then you can start to create these other tools for marketing, essentially. That's what they are. They're means of communication. So you've got your core thesis, and then you push that thesis out in different ways with different wrapping around it, and you test it. You test it with the media. You test it with potential customers. You test it with your grandparents or your parents or your kids. You test it with as many different kinds of people you can, and you start to realize which of these kind of artifacts work in which situations. There's an interesting note in a book called Rework. And they talk a little bit about how in this guy's startup, they don't have anybody with the word marketing in their name. They don't have a chief marketing officer. They don't have anybody who's doing Marcom, because their philosophy is that everybody is doing marketing all the time. Whenever you email somebody, whenever you call somebody, whenever you meet somebody at a party and explain to them what it is you do for a living, that's marketing. Marketing is a lot broader than what we think it is, which is, ads on TV and on the sides of buses. It's all those things you use to explain your value and explain the power of what you have to a certain set of people. So let's go back to this and start by breaking this down in a really granular fashion. This core sentence has 3 components in it. The first thing is, what is it? What's the product? What's the service? Using specific non-technical language. The second thing is, who is it for? Everybody is not a target customer. Although you might want everybody to buy one, you need to start small. You need to start with a niche, get their buy-in, and then expand from within. They sometimes call that the beachhead, right? You land on your beachhead, and then you can expand. Thirdly, what's the value you provide them? Values are not features of your product. Values are things that people value in their life. Let me explain what I mean by that. Just this last point here. The idea that if you combine the 3 of those together in a certain way, the emergent property therein is that they're unique. Nobody should have ever before you combined that product with that customer with those values before. If they have, then you don't have anything unique. Your value proposition is one of a kind. It should only apply to your company. So let's look at some examples here. Let's start with some bad technical talk. Okay? I picked something that everybody knows, a department store, Winners. So we can say something about Winners that is true, and that is Winners is an off-price department store owned by TJX that employs international sourcing and buying power. That's a true statement. I took it straight off their website. But it's not on the front page. It's buried way back in the FAQs, and it's the answer to a question like, how can Winners afford to give such deep discounts on famous brands? This is kind of like their secret sauce, the technology in the back end, the way the business model runs that allows them to do what they do. But if we need a simple sentence to explain what Winners does, it might sound something like this. By the way, these aren't official versions. This is just I made these up. Winners is a department store that offers fashion-conscious consumers the latest brand names for up to 60% off. Let's look at that. In red, I have the what is it. These are the 3 components. What is it? In blue, for whom? Green is the values. So what is it? It's a department store. For whom? Fashion-conscious consumers. I might even actually tighten. If they were launching a department store, I would tighten that down. Fashion-conscious consumers between the ages of 18 and 25 with this much disposable income and in this neighborhood. Nice and specific and clearly testable. The values are latest brand names, so they're appealing to that value that people have of status and being up to date. Up to 60% off, so there's a fiscal value there of saving money. This is our chemical isomer friend. So he was describing the technology behind it, but we pushed him a little bit on it. A1 Industries, it's not the real name, by the way, has developed an economical and easy-to-use chemical additive that allows paint manufacturing companies to reduce the environmental impact of their products. So what is it? It's a chemical additive. For whom? Paint manufacturing companies. Values, it's economical, so it can save you money. It's easy to use, and it reduces the environmental impact. So those are valuable things to a company. Even when we got this final sentence down, the gentleman didn't like the specificity of paint manufacturing companies because you can use this same process in anything that is poured or molded, so plastic chairs, plastic widgets. And he was like, you know, the market potential of this is huge, but he has to start somewhere. So basically, he has this value proposition for paint manufacturing companies. When he's talking to somebody from a plastic chair company, he takes out paint manufacturing companies and calls it, this is specifically for plastic chair manufacturing companies. Because if it's too vague, then nobody sees themselves in it. They're like, is this for me? I don't know. But if you list their name right there in the value prop, they're like, oh, this is made specifically for me. I better pay attention. Google. Google uses a patented page ranking algorithm to make money through ad placement. That's basically their business model. And I should say, this is another kind of, this slide, 3 or 4 years old, when Google was basically just a search engine. You know, now they do everything. So when I'm talking about Google, I'm talking about the search engine core functionality of Google, the website. So a value statement around that would look something like this. Google is the world's largest search engine that allows internet users to find relevant information quickly and easily. So what is it? It's a search engine. For whom? Internet users. Values, relevance, speed, and ease of use. That ease of use thing is really important, right? If even to this day, if you go to that main Google page, they don't have thousands of things around that, just nice, clean, white space. It's so obvious what you do there. You just go, type into the box. That's it. It's key to their value statement. Just to kind of throw something in the wrench here to keep in mind, some people have what we call double-sided business models, or they have customers and end users who are not the same people. So I pose this question here. Are internet users really Google's customers? So who are their customers? Yeah, the advertisers, right? That's who pays the checks. That's where they get their money from. So we can tweak this and have another value proposition for the customers. So the last one was for end users, the people who actually use it in the end. And this is for the customers. So Google is the world's largest search engine that automatically provides advertisers with potential customers tailored to the ad content, increasing click-through rates and conversion rates. So click-through rate is kind of a technical term, but advertisers would know what that means. So what is it? It's still a search engine. For whom? This time it's for advertisers, because they're the ones we want money from. The values, automated, tailored, increase click-through rates and increase conversion rates, which essentially is the financial bottom line of the company we're speaking to. So I want you to keep those values in mind as we go on. And I'm going to just talk a little bit about, again, what we mean by this word value. I sometimes like to put an S at the end of that and ask people to think about their own values, almost like ethically. Like, what do you value in your life? And it depends on what situation you're in. It depends on who you're with. You know, there are so many values that I think we ignore when we look at how to market our products. When we talk about in a business sense, these two always come up in first. What do people value in business? Money and saving time. And in essence, the way we speak about them in Western countries, the way we speak about them, they're almost the same thing, right? You can spend time, save time, waste time, invest time. So what we do when we're talking about a value you bring to the company, if you can be very specific and say, I can save you 60 cents per widget on this. That's my value that I'm bringing to you. We have a platform that can save 3 cents per sheet. And then they do the calculations and they say, well, that's a lot of money. We can enable you to make more money if you use our software. Another value you can talk about is convenience. If I walk out, down a main street of Toronto and I want to get a cup of coffee, if there's a Tim Hortons on every other corner, it's convenient for me, so I'm just going to go into a Tim Hortons. If convenience is something that I value, Tim Hortons is the place for me. If quality is my preeminent value, if I'm a really snobby coffee drinker, and I'm not, but there are some here in Mars, if quality is the thing that I value the most, then I'm going to wait until I find one of those artisanal coffee shops that'll make a perfect cappuccino for me. Those are two different target markets. So if you're Tim Hortons or if you're the coffee shop, you need to know who your value proposition is aimed at. The fact that something can be customized or customizable for your needs, right, is a big value selling point. Usability, ease of use and design is a big selling point. If you can figure out to lower the risk inherent in somebody's operation, like making paint smell less and being better for the environment, or if you can come up with safety features that will help. There was an entrepreneur that I worked with up in Guelph, and he had a system that would track all the braking data for a truck. So it could predict before anything went wrong with the brake pads, or before anything snapped, it could predict when it was up for time, and it would have like an accelerometer in it to check. And it made that whole process of driving safer. Health. Right? It's one of those things where at Christmas, you put up your glass and you say, hey, what's the most important value? It's health, right? And it's funny, we did some workshops with a whole bunch of life science entrepreneurs, and these guys were, drugs to cure cancer. And, when we were doing an activity, let's brainstorm all the things we value, and this never came up. Because they were thinking, oh, I'm in business now, it's all about money, I have to make money, But health is one of those things that if you can show that your product makes people healthier or uses that as a preeminent value, you'll do okay. Aesthetics, right? Last year I used the example, I was in Venice 2 or 3 years ago, and they have these elaborate blown glass, beautiful, blown glass, very fragile creatures that go for a lot of money. And I didn't quite get it. But there are some people who track those down, and they love them. And the only reason, there's no practical reason. It doesn't save you any time or any money to get that. It doesn't make your health better. It's just the aesthetic pleasure of it. Status, this is a big one. And newness is tied in with that. Lining up for the new iPhone makes no sense in a world where time and money are the preeminent values, right? But for a lot of people, the status and being as part of those early adopter group is way more important than money. In fact, they pay for that privilege. They pay a lot on the first day. They will pay more for the privilege to be one of the first 1,000 people with an iPhone. These are two values that might not have been up here if I was giving this talk 20 or 30 or 40 years ago. People will pay more for the values of environmental sustainability or ethical consumption, right? Fair trade coffee, this kind of thing. Social inclusion, like the value of something like Facebook. Facebook doesn't help you make money. Well, it might for some people who have social networking type businesses, but as an end user, it's a time vampire, right? It sucks time away from your day. It doesn't give you time or give you money or allow you to be more productive, but you have this value of social inclusion. Self-actualization is this fancy word that basically, this is the top of the pyramid of like, if you've ever heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, this is like the ultimate in self-fulfillment, right? You go home every day, you go home on a Friday night and you sit at home and you practice your piano or you practice your clarinet. And you don't do that because you make money at it or because it saves you time or any of these other things. You just do it because it makes you feel good and you get better and better at it. And it's like a self-growth thing. That's a very powerful value if you can tap into that. These are the words you should use in your value proposition, literally. And I'm going to show you a template in a minute. Take a picture of this, actually, if you've got a photo. Take a picture of it, because the next slide I'm going to show you has a template. And you can use these words in that template. These will all be online as well, I think. When we talk about these kinds of values, traditionally we talk about the values on the right of this diagram are generally the kinds of values that we would use when we were selling things to business, so-called B2B sales, business-to-business sales, right? A lot of emphasis on the bottom line, on how much money is this going to save me, how much time is this going to save my workers, will this enable me to get more clients in the door, is it convenient, is it easy to use? And these are all, with one or two exceptions, these are all measurable things. You can measure how long it takes somebody to achieve a task on a platform and compare it to my platform, and it took half the time, so the usability is great. Selling direct to consumer is sometimes harder because those values are not necessarily measurable. We sometimes call these values on the left latent values because they're things that we care about that need to be kind of pulled out. They're not explicit values that a business will say, in their quarterly reports. We're looking at ways of saving in money and saving time. We're always watching our bottom line. Selling to customers is a little tricky, because sometimes they don't even know what they value. You got to pull it out of them. Now, I've done a little dotted line there because, of course, it's not hard and fast. There's lots of crossover. And in the last few months, actually, I've been reading quite a bit about how this B2B and B2C distinction is kind of collapsing a little bit with the distribution channels on the internet. So here's the template. I would encourage you to take a picture of this as well. And when I'm speaking for the next 15 minutes, get a piece of paper and try some. Try to write this sentence out for your company or whatever you're thinking of doing. Try to just fill in the blanks. So wherever there's a gray word, you write over top of that. You fill in the blanks. And you try to come up with a sentence that captures what it is you do. Or I should say, what it is you think you do, so that you can say, OK, good. Now I'm going to go out and test this on real people. I'm going to read it to them, and I'm going to see if they understand it. I'm going to explain my idea in this way and see if they agree with me that, yeah, those are values that matter to me. So the template it starts with the target audience. So for blank, who's your target audience, my company has created this product that results in value, value, value. So that's kind of the rough form of the ones we looked at before, right? It's got the what in there. What is it? The product name. It's got the values, and it's got the target audience built right in. Don't worry so much about the names yet. I mean, the names can come later. Matching the values to the target audience is the most important piece right now. So let's move on to talk about some of these others and how they spin off of that main sentence. So again, keep that in front of you on a pad of paper and scribble down some ideas around value prop, and we'll see how it ties into these other marketing tools. The elevator pitch is one that you hear a lot about, and it literally happens in this building, right? People have 25 seconds in that elevator to be like, oh, I haven't seen you in a while. What are you working on? Well, and then they dive into their elevator pitch. An elevator pitch is essentially about a 60-second, 30 if you can get away with it, description of your business, of what you're doing, and why it's interesting. This is a loose structure of it. We talk about the hook. We talk about the problem you're trying to solve, and then the solution to that problem, which is your value proposition. If you have time, you can talk about what makes you different, but the really important thing here is that at the end of your elevator pitch, you've got to have a call to action. What do you want that person to do? Let me show you what this looks like. Let's talk about the hook. And for my money, this is along with the call to action, the hook is, the two bookends are more important than the meat in the middle for this. The hook is so important. You don't just want to launch into a 30-second memorized tirade about what it is you do, because people will be like, you're weird. And it doesn't sound any good. What you want to do is you want to hook them with something interesting. So the first one I'm going to use actually as a theme throughout the rest. This was from a blog, a guy named Mark Suster, who writes a blog called Both Sides of the Table. And he was talking about a company where their hook was, somebody's like, oh, hey, I haven't seen you in a while. What do you do? And he's like, oh, I buy dead magazines. And they're like, what? And that's exactly what you want. You want them to go, what? What do you mean? Tell me more. And then you've been given permission to actually explain what it is you do. The company that I started a few years ago, the Treehouse Group, I would tell people this: we make conferences not boring. People are like, that's not grammatically correct. But they would stop and they'd be like, what do you mean by that? That sounds weird. So there's tacit permission to go on and explain exactly what it is we do. Another one I found online, which I really liked, is we sell 15-minute vacations. This was from a luxury car rental company, which is a great little hook line to be like, what might that consist of? So ideally, the person then says, what do you mean? Tell me more. And then you can explain the problem that you set out to solve. So for I Buy Dead magazines, the next sentence is, well, paper-based magazines are failing. Something like 40% of the paper magazines in the last 10 years have gone bankrupt. For the Treehouse Group, I'd say something like, conferences are usually really boring because they're just one-way communication. But we know that people learn best when they're working in groups and they're working on something that engages them. The car company would say something like, when people commute to work, it's really stressful. And that's the problem. That's what they're hoping to solve in this. And then you can explain a little bit more about what your solution is. And this is where you unveil your value proposition. So for the dead magazines, we might say something like, I buy dead magazines. That's interesting. Tell me more. Well, something like 40% of print magazines have gone out of business in the last 10 years. What we do is we buy up those print magazines that are failing and reinvent them on the web as digital publications. So for traditional magazine publishers, my company, Solid Media, provides an online template called DigiPub, which repurposes that print material for online consumption at a lower cost and opens up the content to a whole new crop of advertisers. That's a little long-winded. You could add some more line breaks in there. But you've basically just told them your value proposition, right? In red, what is it? It's an online template called DigiPub. It's a template for magazine publishers. For whom? It's for traditional small magazine publishers. And the values, well, you're repurposing content. It's lower cost than they're used to, and it opens them up to new markets, to a new crop of advertisers, so you're enabling them to do more business. Okay, so the value proposition is buried right in there in the flow of your elevator pitch. If you've got the nod and they're like, oh, that's cool, you can add on something that differentiates you. So something like, what we do is we add the e-magazine metadata into our recommendation engine, kind of like Amazon or Netflix, which brings in new readers that they couldn't have found in an analog format. That's a great idea. Call to action. Well, we're signing up beta customers now to play around with the site and tell us what they think, so check it out, business card. I mean, that's like the perfect elevator pitch. It never works out quite like that. But the point is that you want to take them on a story. You start with a hook. You say, oh, there's this problem, but we've solved it. And you've got a nice, crisp sentence that summarizes your solution, and then you give them something to do with that. Check out our website, or do you want to meet at the break for a coffee, and I'll tell you a bit more about how it works. Let's talk about the positioning statement. The positioning statement, this is an easy one. It's essentially your value proposition plus what we call a competitive anchor. So some of you might have had this experience where you've explained what it is you do, and people look at you and go, oh, that's just like Netflix. Or, oh, just like Google. And you're always in your head, you're like, no, it's different. So what you do then is you anticipate that. You reel off your value proposition, and then before they can ask a question, you say, unlike Press Publisher 4.0, Digipub adds metadata to the content, which connects them with new readers and new advertisers. Right? So you kind of preempt it. And because they're already thinking of, in this case, Press Publisher 4, what you kind of do is you use that as an anchor, a cognitive anchor in their brain. So now, when they think of Press Publisher, ideally, they'll think of Solid Media or Digipub, because now they're associated. You've made that association. So instead of lamenting the fact that Press Publisher is kind of getting all your spotlight, use that to your advantage, right? List them in your value proposition, right, and how you're different. And then you kind of get dragged along as baggage, in their brain. Whenever they hear Solid Media, there's this guy hanging off my leg who's called Digipub. Like anything, this line is subject to testing. So if we're finding people don't know who Press Publisher are, then we could say, OK, so it's kind of like WordPress, but Digipub is for magazine publishers alone to repurpose their content and discover new readers online. A positioning metaphor, this is one of my favorites. And if you come up with a really good one, it can really, really work. So a positioning metaphor is a way to anchor your brand, again, around something people already understand. Right? So you kind of anchor it to a brand they already know. So you could say Digipub is like Shopify for magazines. If people know what Shopify, well, if people don't know what Shopify is, then it's not a good metaphor. So you go to something like Digipub is to the magazine industry what Kobo is for books. So you make a parallel comparison. Digipub is like WordPress, but just for magazines. Digipub combines the metadata from Amazon with the templates in WordPress specifically for magazine publishers. So you create metaphors for people. I was literally, a few months ago, I was in the elevators here. I was literally in an elevator. And I heard one guy say, hey, what are you working on these days? And he says, oh, I'm working with a startup called Hammurati. They're in our incubator. And he says, oh, what is that? And he says, oh, it's like eBay for home contractors. I was like, that is a great metaphor, because you understand what eBay is, and you understand the process of home contracting. And I went and checked out the site, and you post jobs, and then contractors bid on it if they want to do it. And I've used it, by the way, and I have a really nice patio at the back of my house. Thank you, Hammurati. The tagline. So this is a marketing compliment. The tagline is a marketing line to accompany your brand name. You can kind of work it into your logo, have a version with your logo. And these are some I just invented. By the way, none of this is real, this Digipub stuff. I'm just making this up. So if you need this, I'm sorry, it's fake. So Digipub, reimagine your magazine. Print is dead, long live print. Follow your readers online. Digipub, bits are cheaper than pages. Digipub, where magazines live online. So you can come up with those, but then the real test of which one you use is up to your users, right? You can perform experiments. There's tons of online platforms now that will send this out to like random people, and it gets them to rank them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Which ones do you like? Which one resonates? Do you understand, just by that tagline, what that company is trying to do? Or not in detail, but understand the flavor of what they're trying to do. And of course, that tagline should be consistent with your value proposition. Whatever the values you're claiming to do, you want to kind of tease those in this tagline. The mission statement. I put this last because, and this is only personal, I'm probably going to get lots of angry mail when I say this, but the mission statement for me is one of the things that comes later, once you truly find out what it is you want to do. The mission statement is a very, very high-level statement that talks about why you want to do this. Why this company? Why now? What is your ultimate goal? right? And this is a blue sky piece. It doesn't say how you do it or when you're going to do it or for whom. It just says, what's your mission in life, So Google's mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. It doesn't say how they're going to do that, but this is their mission. Facebook's mission is to give people the power to share and make the world more open and connected. Solid Media, this is Digipub's mission, is to connect curious readers to the very best written on the web. This is my last piece of advice around this. And I've seen this work a lot. When you get your value proposition and you think you like it, and you think you're going to go test it, write it down for everybody in your office, all three of you, and make sure that whenever you're out and you're at a party, you're using the same elevator pitch, exactly the same language, so that you can have, it's like in science, you control that variable so that you can have an honest test around what that looks like. So what I like to do is come up with a list of these kind of marketing tools. And I didn't include tagline or mission statement because those pretty much stay the same. But the things that change depending on who you're talking to. So for Digipub, if I'm talking to somebody in the magazine industry, I have a certain value proposition that will resonate with them as my customer, the person who pays the bills. The end readers, I need those to find my site too. I have a different value proposition for them. And then for the media, the general interest piece, like what's in it for them? So an elevator pitch for the media, here I am in the last column in the second row. For the media, the hook is often something that happened in the media a week ago, because they're looking for timely stories. If you can hook what you do to something that's already a trend, then it's more likely they'll write about you, right? Just last week, so-and-so magazine went bankrupt. That's the 4th this month in Canada. We're capitalizing on that trend by creating an online platform where, and then you kind of go into your value proposition. But if you can use a hook that the journalist will understand is timely and relevant, that's ideal. Same with positioning. There's some kind of anchor competition that people will understand in magazine publishing that the general public won't. Same with the metaphors. And at the bottom, I have stats. And this is just to make sure that when anybody goes out into the wide world, you've got the same statistics and the same kind of talking points to start from. Right? So you've got this cheat sheet here. And if it's consistent, then your marketing is consistent, your branding is consistent from a very, very early stage. So I'll finish here and leave this up because I really want to emphasize that this is the main thing that needs to be in place before those other things can be completed. And it will change, it should change, because that means you're listening to your customers. But the only way of doing it is just to get started, to start on that sentence, to start to crystallize exactly what it is you're doing and why it's valuable into one concise sentence. It's a hard thing to do, but if you try it, it'll really help with the next stages of growing your business. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Joe. If we have any questions from the audience, there are a couple mics. If you could just come up to the mic so the people on the webcast can hear, that would be great.
I like your control panel over there.
I know, it's very high tech.
Hi, Joe.
Hey, yeah.
Hi. My name is Nick, and I'm working on a project right now where I really need to go out and talk to the customer base themselves. So what would you recommend in terms of asking the right kinds of questions, whether it be like a form sitting down with them or just kind of starting with what's the pain kind of in what you're doing and deriving that, or just have already pre-made questions, just ask them? What do you find more effective?
That's a great question. So there's a book that I'd really recommend. It's by Ash Maurya, Maurya, and it's called Running Lean. It's a fantastic book. He has pages of sample interview templates that you can use, even sample email texts that he's found that work. So I definitely would come up with 2 or 3 preset questions, but leave them a little open-ended at the end. So if somebody starts complaining about an associated problem, you're taking notes and saying, OK, if I hear that 10 times, then that's something I should focus on. And yeah, so I would definitely pick that book up and use some of those as guidance.
Just to clarify, it's Ash Maurya, Running Lead?
Running lean.
Lean.
Running
Like
lean.
lean startup, running lean, yeah.
On the E101 schedules, on the back, there's a list of recommended resources. It's one of the top books to read, and it's about lean startup and doing problem interviews and then solution interviews, and has templates, as Joe said. Well, actually, in January, when Usha comes and talks about market discovery, we'll talk a bit more about those problem and solution interviews, because it's super important.
I think that's a good point, too. There are 2 very different interviews. Your first interview should just be trying to understand the person's problem. That's it. And it's so hard because you want to bite your tongue and say, I have the best solution for you. But don't, not yet. Just ask, tell me about that process now. Is it perfect? What annoys you about that? You know, how much money, is wasted in this problem? You just want to get them complaining, right? Get them complaining at you, and then you've made a friend. And then you go back and you say, I think you might, can I pick your brain on something I've been working on? I think this might help you in your problem. And then that's the solution interview, right? Where you get feedback on your minimum viable product or your early product. And they can tell you, no, this doesn't solve my problem here, but I love this feature, that kind of thing.
Thank you so much, Joe.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And you'll be surprised, especially people will talk about their problems. Don't be afraid to sit down and talk. People will like to help you. Sorry, that came out wrong, but they, a lot of people are afraid to ask for an interview, and people are surprisingly helpful. And as Joe said, if you get into the solution, it feels a bit salesy, so it's really good just to ask lots of great questions and just listen. Before we take this question, just a quick one on the webcast. Great presentation, Joe, thank you. You mentioned a website that allows you to submit taglines for feedback where people rank the effectiveness of it. What is the name of the site again?
I don't know. I cannot remember.
idon'tknow.com?
There's a number of them. Can I send them to you?
Wasn't there a value proposition generator? There's something.
Yeah, there's a number of sites that will do experiments for you like that. You put in the title of a book, and it'll go through iterations of it and pick the best one for you by crowdsourcing that. I don't know, but can I send them to you? Can we get them out?
We can put it in the
maybe
next week's
tomorrow
newsletter.
or next week you can put them up here or something. Nathan has a ton of those. You heard Nathan last week too, right?
Yeah.
Nathan Monk. He's got a ton of those tools that we can share.
Great.
Yeah.
Hi there, my name is Eric, and I'm curious about, aside from the book that you just recommended, how do you deal with the issue of the customer sort of telling you what you want to hear when you're asking for feedback on maybe a beta version or early prototypes of your product?
You mean they're too nice, like they don't want to offend you, and they're just telling you what? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I would kind of ask them specifically, like, this is great feedback. I've heard a lot of good things. To make the product better, I really need to hear criticism. Do you have any suggestions of things that could be better, or things that you really didn't like? And if they say, oh no, it was perfect, then find some other customers. Or maybe you've got like a perfect product, but you don't. So just find a wide variety of customers and see what resonates with which ones.
Thank you.
Hi there, Fareed Masheton from Gentleman's Post.
Hey.
We've identified as a group what our value proposition is. We've done the elevator pitch. We've got hammered on it quite a lot. But what we struggle with is a tagline. It's hard to sort of come up with a formulaic way of doing it. Just wanted to know, to get your thoughts on, I mean, you touched upon it to come up with various versions of it and run it by people, but what are your thoughts on coming up with a successful tagline so you can use it in your email address, you can use it in short introductions and so forth?
Do you have a product out already?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. I wouldn't worry about it too much. I don't think it's one of those core things that will make or break you. I mean, there's a number of kind of creative activities you can do around this. One of them is one of my favorites is in these customer interviews, if you have the time and energy for this, is get them all, like if you type their answers, take all their answers and put it in a word cloud. Whatever words they are using, those are the words you use to them.
Okay.
So you take like the top 4 words, mix them around, and there's your tagline, you know? Not literally, but you know, like you just use what they say back at them. It's very judo, right? So I would just keep a list beside your computer, and whenever there are words that really resonate with people, just start writing them down, and then you know the 3 of you just look over them and start combining them, and see if you can be inspired to come up with a little pithy statement that it captures some of those words.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Hi.
Hey.
I'm in the process of choosing a name for my business, and one of the options I had, somebody told me that the name itself has too much of a meaning behind it in terms of what we do as a business.
Mm-hmm.
It's too close to the value proposition because you're telling them what you do in the name of the business, and then again, you're telling them in the value proposition what you do, and it just becomes a little overkill. What do you think about that?
I think it's great to have a name that reinforces what your core value is. If it's too descriptive, that might be the product name, and then the company name is something that isn't related, but you don't really use that. You don't really talk about your company name, you talk about your product, right? But I don't see that as a problem. I think that's great. I mean, repetition is key with this stuff, right? People don't remember things just one time. They need like 4 or 5. You know, they keep using that word. That must be the core of what they do.
I would add something to that. I think the challenge is it's okay if you are certain that your product has the product market fit to reinforce that. If it's early and you're going to pivot, then you're going to regret the name. It's hard to know without the name. A perfect example is even in sort of our innovation network. You know, if you have a name like Invest Ottawa, that will be limited to Ottawa, right? Where something like Mars doesn't have the name Toronto, and so we can expand. So in an early days, it might be good to have separate, as Joe says, not to have your company name be tied to your product in case you pivot. But then that said, if you know the product is really good and it's descriptive, it also reinforces the communication. So it's kind of, it could be both ways. It depends on where you are in your development.
You might want to just use that product name kind of as your company name and not tell anybody what your company name is.
Right.
And then when you get big enough to buy somebody else, then now you've got 2 products and there's a company above it.
Right. Kind of like how Apple computers drop the computers and
yeah, sure. Yes,
Apple
exactly.
Inc. Yes,
exactly. Yeah. So if you're the next Apple, it works.
Well, thanks, Joe. That was a great presentation. It's always clear communication coming from you and really drives home the point about the importance of describing value in your value proposition. We appreciate it.
Thanks.